The salt in her bones. Copyright 2026, ESA Millila. All rights reserved. For ages 13 plus. Follow me on my Facebook page, Something is Listening Vikings. The blood was not hers. It painted the snow around her in great, gushing arcs, black against the white in the twilight. It belonged to the beast, the final beast, a creature of shaggy gray fur and too many legs that now lay twitching at her feet. Sigrid yanked her seeks from its throat, her breath coming in ragged gasps that plumed in the frigid air. Her arms burned. Her shield was gone, splintered somewhere on the icy slope behind her. The last of the pack, smaller, smarter, watched her from the tree line, its eyes like chips of frozen sea ice. It didn't charge. It simply turned and melted back into the gloom of the pines, a promise of return. Around her, the hunting party was dead. Or as good as. Leaf, who'd taught her to set a snare, lay with his throat open to the sky. Old Una, whose joints ached with the cold, was pinned beneath a mass of fur and claw. The quiet was the worst part. No screams, no war cries, just the wet, hungry sounds of the attack, and now this vast, indifferent silence. The blood was already freezing on her hands. She didn't go home. She couldn't. How could she walk into the longhouse, into the warmth and the smell of stew, and tell them? How could she look at Leaf's daughter, who was only 6? Instead, she walked. She walked through the killing field, past the bodies of her friends, and kept walking, up the rise towards the headland. The wind picked up, biting through her woolen tunic, whipping her braids against her stinging cheeks. She walked until she reached the old stones. The Ring of Vather. That's what the elders called it. A circle of standing stones, taller than a man, their surfaces mottled with ancient lichen. No one came here. It was a place for the gods, and the gods of late were fickle, silent things. Sigrid's people whispered offerings to Herger, the weaver of waves, for safe passage. They left the best cut of meat for Brocker, the forge master, to bless their iron. But they didn't really believe. Not like the old sagas said you were supposed to. It was just a thing you did, a habit like holding your breath past a grave. Sigrid stumbled into the circle's center. The wind seemed to die here. The silence was deeper, pressing in on her ears. She fell to her knees in the snow, not to pray, but because her legs wouldn't hold her. A terrible, shameful sound escaped her. Not a sob. A crack. A fissure in the stone of her own making. She had failed. She was alive, and that felt like the worst failure of all. A stone skittered across the snow. She looked up. A figure stood between two of the monoliths. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, dressed in a cloak of woven feathers that wrestled with a life of their own. Her hair was the color of dry straw, and her face was long, carved from pale wood. But it was her eyes that held Sigrid. They were the color of the sea on a gray day, and within them, Sigrid saw a reflection of the slaughter on the ridge. The running, the falling, the blood. "You see it," Sigrid whispered, her voice a croak. "In your eyes. You saw." The woman tilted her head, a bird-like movement. "I see what is forgotten," she said. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves. "They did not ask for my help. You're hunters. They did not think of me. Who are you?" Sigrid asked, though some part of her already knew. This was no woman. This was something older, something that belonged to the stones. "They called me Varlogs." The name stirred something deep in Sigrid's memory, a story from her grandmother's grandmother. Varlogs, the keeper of the slain. Not the glorifier of heroes in the mead hall songs, but the one who found you in the cold, in the mud, in the lonely places. The one who gathered what the battle joy forgot. "I remember," Sigrid breathed. "The stories. They said you were cruel." The god's thin lips almost formed a smile. "They said I was honest." "Which is crueler?" She took a step into the circle. "There are fewer of you now. Fewer who call my name. I have become thin." She held up a hand, and for a moment, Sigrid could see the stones of the ring right through it. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind ran down her spine. The god was fading. Like morning mist. Then, "Help me," Sigrid pleaded, a sudden, desperate fire igniting in her chest. "Help me get them home. I can't carry them alone. Leaf has a daughter." She needs to see his face. Varlogs looked at her for a long time, her gaze weighing something Sigrid couldn't understand. A bargain, she said at last. I will lend you my strength to bring your fallen home. In return, you will speak my name. Not in the longhouse, not in the hearing of others. But here, when you are alone, when the world is still, you will speak to me of the ones who are forgotten. It was a strange price. A few words. A moment of her time. Compared to the weight of the dead, it was nothing. I agree, Sigrid said. Varlogs nodded. She did not chant or gesture. She simply became more solid, the stones no longer visible through her form. She walked past Sigrid, out of the circle, and down the slope towards the carnage. Sigrid scrambled to her feet and followed. What happened next was a blur of impossible strength. Sigrid, with her own arms burning with exhaustion, watched the god lift a full-grown man onto her shoulder as if he were a sack of feathers. She worked in silence, her face betraying no emotion, no disgust, no sorrow. She was simply the task. When Sigrid faltered, her feet slipping in the blood-soaked snow, a hand that felt like ice and iron gripped her arm and steadied her. By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, the bodies of the hunting party lay in a solemn row on the threshold of the village. The god was gone, but her absence felt like a presence. Sigrid walked into the longhouse, her legs wooden. The wails began the moment they saw her, saw the line of the dead. She was surrounded, hugged, questioned. She told them of the beasts, the ambush, her own desperate fight. But when they asked how she'd managed to drag them all home, she hesitated. And in that hesitation, a lie bloomed on her tongue. She spoke of a surge of strength, of the gods smiling on her. She did not speak of Varlogs. She felt a pang of something. Guilt? Fear? She had made a bargain, and she had already broken the spirit of it by not telling the truth. But to tell them would be to invite madness. For a week, life in the village returned to its brutal, normal rhythm. Grief was a thing you worked through with your hands. You chopped wood, you mended nets, you tended the fires. But every evening, as the darkness crept in from the sea, Sigrid would slip away. She would walk to the ring of Vather, and she would speak. At first, it was awkward. She told Varlogs about Leif's daughter, how she clutched his carved fishing float in her sleep. She told her about Una's famous stew, the one no one else could make right. She spoke the names of the dead into the empty air. And each time, after she finished, she would feel a strange sense of peace. A lightness. Then, on the seventh night, Varlogs was there. She stood in the center of the ring, more solid than before. The feather cloak rustled. You keep your word. You kept yours, Sigrid replied. A question had been gnawing at her. Why? Why do you need this? A few words about dead people. Varlogs turned her sea-gray eyes on her. I am not Brocker, who is strengthened by the clang of the hammer and the gift of steel. I am not Herger, who swells with each launched ship. I am made of memory. Of the last thought of a dying man. Of the tear on a widow's cheek. Of the name whispered when there is no one left to hear it. These things are my meat and my mead. And there are fewer of them. People are still dying, Sigrid said, a hard edge to her voice. You saw. Yes. But now they die for Brocker and Herger. The men pray to them for victory, for a good catch. Their last breath is filled with the names of gods who promise them glory in the next world. Her gaze drifted to the village below. Your people no longer fear the lonely death. They no longer honor the ones who are simply gone. And so I grow thin. And soon, I will be nothing but a story you half remember. Sigrid thought of Leif's daughter, holding his float. That was a kind of memory. A fierce, protective feeling rose in her. Is there no other way? Can you not make yourself known? Show them a sign. A strange, sad smile touched the god's lips. I tried once. A long time ago. They called it a curse. A plague of grief. She shook her head. No. This is the way of things. We are not meant to last forever. The words hung in the air, cold and final. It was wrong. All of it felt wrong. These people, her people, were so busy praying for a good catch or a strong sword arm that they had forgotten to simply mourn. They had forgotten the dignity of the end. The turning point came with the blizzard. It struck without warning, a howling white wall that erased the world. A fishing boat, caught too far out, was driven onto the rocks at the base of the headland. By the time the storm cleared, 3 men were dead, their bodies battered against the stone. Sigrid's father was one of them. The grief that struck her was a physical thing, a boulder on her chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't cry. She just sat in the corner of the longhouse, staring at nothing, while the women prepared the body for burial. They would sing the songs to Herger, asking him to calm the waves for my father's spirit. They would lay his best axe in his hands for Brocker to prove his worth in the halls of the forge. They were the wrong songs. Her father hadn't died in glorious battle. He hadn't been forging a great weapon. He'd been cold and scared and drowned in the dark. He needed Varlogs. That night, Sigrid fought her way through the waist-deep snow to the ring of Vathor. The wind still whipped, but inside the circle, it was calm. She fell to her knees. His name was Arn, she said, her voice choked. He liked to whistle. He was teaching me to read the currents. He was afraid of deep water, but he went out anyway, because the village needed fish. He didn't die a hero. He died scared and alone. She stopped, a sob tearing from her throat. Take him, please. He's forgotten. He's forgotten by all the other gods. Don't let him be alone. A hand, cool and solid, rested on her shoulder. She looked up. Varlog stood over her, her strange eyes glistening. For the first time, there was something human in them. Sorrow. Recognition. He is not alone, Varlog said. I have him. I have them all. Sigrid grabbed the god's wrist. Then let me help you. Let me show them. They need to know. They need to remember. Varlog studied her for a long moment. Finally, she knelt, bringing her face level with Sigrid's. To speak of me is to invite a question you cannot answer. They will ask how you know. They will call you touched by madness. Or a witch. I don't care. The god reached out and traced a line on Sigrid's palm with a finger like an icicle. A sharp sting, a thin line of blood, and then it was done. In its place, a pale mark like a scar in the shape of a single, falling tear. Then let them wonder, Varlogs whispered. She stood and walked towards the stones. Sigrid watched her go, her hand stinging, her heart a battlefield of grief and a strange, fierce hope. She would go back to the village. She would stand at her father's funeral. And when they sang to Herger, she would be silent. But later, in the quiet, when the torches were low and the grief was fresh, she would whisper the truth to the ones who needed it most. She turned to leave the circle, the wind already picking up, erasing her footprints. As she reached the edge of the stones, she paused. There, on the inner face of the tallest monolith, was a mark. It hadn't been there before. It was fresh, carved deep into the ancient rock. A single, falling tear. She heard it then, or thought she did, on the wind that whistled through the pines. Not a howl. A whisper. The sound of a name, spoken by a voice like dead leaves. Her name. The end for now. Follow me on my Facebook page, Something is Listening Vikings.